Welcome back to another episode of That's Business. Today's guest, Lisa Colledge, is the founder of Lisa Colledge Consulting, where she helps businesses thrive amid constant change by harnessing the power of cognitive diversity. Specializing in transforming organizational cultures, Lisa focuses on attracting and empowering diverse thinking styles, drawing inspiration from neurodivergence inclusion. Lisa, I'm very passionate about this whole process in the neurodivergent community, so I'm really excited to talk today. This whole term of neurodivergency, I feel is a newer term, or it's more in mainstream media. So throwing it back first, did we always know we wanted to work and help people in the neurodivergent community? Or let's go back to, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I would never have predicted all those years ago, which I won't mention when I was small, that this is what I would be doing now. No, it was just really not what you would expect if you knew where I started out. So what did I want to be when I was small? I never knew, to be honest. I was always focused on trying to do something which I was interested in right now. And I never had a master plan. I've always kind of followed my nose and my passion. I do remember the day when I worked out what I first wanted to do when I went to university, right, which was to study biochemistry.
Wow.
I know. Was unexpected. So now we were doing, I was studying biology at a high level at school, and we did a module which was biochemistry, and I loved it. The second that we started it, I loved it. It was the most difficult subject for a lot of my classmates, but I just felt really at home there and I loved it. So I said, yeah, biochemistry is for me. This is where I'm going to start. I'm going to go and study biochemistry at university. And I didn't really know what to do with it. But then, that's where I started.
Wow. So how far did you go into your schooling that, wow, I am so bad at science and it's interesting to me, but it just does not click in this brain of mine. So
we all have different brains. So, we don't all have to be good at the same thing. It would be quite boring if we were.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how far did you take your degree, or did you end up, once you graduated from university, going into that first out of college, or what happened then?
I studied for a degree. I went to University of Oxford, which was one of the few universities in the UK. I was a driven and a good student, right, academically. So I was well suited to that kind of scene. Yeah, it was one of the few universities that was offering biochemistry at that time, kind of early 90s, when I went to university. It was quite a new subject back then. So I did my degree, master's degree, and then I decided that I wanted to stay on and do a doctorate as well. That I struggled with a doctorate, but I got it, and I published some papers. And then I even did a postdoctorate because,
why not?
I didn't really know what to do, and then I had this idea that, I love biochemistry so much, and I just really, really want to contribute something to the world of biochemistry. And I have quite a logical brain that follows a path. So I thought, the way to do that is obviously by becoming a research scientist.
My gosh.
So I tried it. I gave it my best shot. And, it was not for me. No regrets. I tried it and I worked out this is not where I'm meant to be. I'm going to go and do something else. But I have no regrets about leaving. And I, learned a lot of stuff which I still bring with me and put into the work that I've been doing since then.
So at what point did you say, okay, this is not for me? When you did decide that, being a very logical thinker, as you mentioned, was it, oh my gosh, I'm not feeling this, I need to do something else, and a quick change? Or did it take a few years to get there? Because you just spent a lot of time going through and get a postdoctorate degree too. So,
Yeah, at that time, I just wasn't really familiar with the concept of jumping to other places in your career. Like we're much more used to that now. It's really much more okay. But way back in the the last century, when I was at university, this was not really common, or at least not to me. It was not so common, or to where I come from. It was you kind of took a path and you stayed with it. So I really did give it my best shot. There were a couple of things when I realized it wasn't for me. So I did my doctorate in one lab, and I just really didn't like it. But I didn't know whether is it the work or is it the supervisor? So let's not give up my dream yet. I'm going to go to another lab and I'm going to check whether I like it. And I still didn't like it. So I concluded it's just the work. I didn't like it. And I also, at that point, was traveling to conferences and presenting at some conference. And I met people who just loved research and talked about it with a passion and just the process of doing research. And it was just not me. I didn't recognize what they were talking about at all. I love reading and putting jigsaw pieces together, but I do not love doing biochemistry. No.
I think the most advanced I was fundamentals of chemistry, like probably something you took in high school, because it's a lot. But that's so interesting because I think that's where a lot of people don't realize when you work with others in the same field or talk to them, communicate with them, the discrepancy of passion of, I don't feel that same way. I can't relate to how much you love research, and identifying that, because that's a big deal. I mean, I know when that time came for me in a few different careers, it's almost like a depressive state of like, what am I doing wrong? Or, what does that next step take?
Yeah.
So how did we decide on this next step? Because you kind of 180'd your career at this point. So talk to us on when you decided to take this leap and get out of research and entirely kind of change your whole life.
Oh, gosh. Well, that was one of the first changes of my entire life. At one of those conferences, I met a guy who was very passionate about research and probably still is for all I know, but he is no longer in my life, as you can tell from how I'm talking about him. He was Dutch, and we decided at some point that we wanted to live together. And he had just got tenure, and this is not something that you give up lightly
No.
in the world of research. And he loved research, and I didn't, so it was pretty much a no-brainer. So I moved to the Netherlands. So it was just, the world kind of made me make a decision. And luckily, that time I started to listen, and I said, it's just time to get out. I just have to go and do something else. So I moved here, where I still am in the Netherlands, and looked for another job. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, because I didn't have a plan.
Right.
But I knew that I wanted to stay on my own steam, not as his girlfriend, but I wanted to stay on my own, so I had to find a job. So I just applied for stuff that I had qualifications for. And I ended up in a company called Elsevier, which is a very large scientific, technical and medical publisher. Anybody who works in research knows about Elsevier and probably hates it because they're the biggest one, so they get blamed for everything that's bad. But they do a lot of good stuff as well. And I started there as a publisher of some journals. I didn't know how to publish journals or what to do, but, I knew enough about research, and I could talk knowledgeably and confidently about the process of research, so I could kind of muddle through while I worked out what does publishing journals and books mean. So yeah, I just kind of fell into it. And I stayed at Elsevier for 22 years, actually, not in that job. That was the first of many jobs that I had in Elsevier. Company changed an awful lot during that time. So it doesn't feel like I was at the same company for all that time. But yeah, that was kind of an accidental start to a big career journey, lots of opportunities.
Well, and I feel that, and you can absolutely disagree with me, but you did the hardest form of writing, I think, in the world, is when you do your research, you do your publications, and just the criteria you have to follow. I mean, I think I still have PTSD from the research I did for my master's degree and getting the right commas and the right spacing, because that's where I got nailed on. And it's, again, my brain is not a logical, meticulous person, and I wish it was a little bit more, but I have so much respect for someone like you who has did this for so long, and getting into the publishing world. Of course, there's little disconnect, but that's such a unique way. When you think of publishing and you think of research, it's two almost completely different buckets or forms of creativity. But realistically, it's still, and the concepts are at the depth of it. You still have to, they do cross over.
Yeah, for sure.
Staying there for 22 years, that's incredible. That's amazing. And I know you had talked about before when you sent me over some information that you've spoken at conferences and you did a lot of public speaking. So was that nerve-wracking to get up to that point, or have you always been someone that you enjoy working in front of an audience?
No, I was over it by then. I mean, I did hate talking to an audience. So I remember when I was doing my first degree at Oxford, I decided that I would make myself do a course. They had all these careers courses. So I did one that was about presenting. And I was almost crying. I was so nervous. And we were just presenting, I don't know, there were 10 or 15 people in the room, and you just had to say what you did at the weekend or something. And I almost fell down at like, "Hi, I'm Lisa." I could hardly get it out, right? I was so scared about it. But, I kind of made it through and I, survived. My postdoc supervisor, she was a very, very good coach with speaking. She used to get her lab to listen to each other's presentations when we had to present to the rest of the division or to a conference. We would just practice, and people would give feedback, constructive feedback. And she would just let you practice like as many times as you needed and repeat bits. I mean, yeah, amazing. And when you can present to your friends that you work with every day, then you can present to anybody. It doesn't matter.
I say the same thing. Anytime I practice for a speaking engagement, I do it with my partner and I do it with my employees, and I feel the most awkward with them because they've heard it so many times that they could probably recite it if they needed to. And it's so funny to me, but I still feel awkward. But if you were say, hey, Angela, I need you to present in an hour in a crowd of 1,000 strangers, no problem. I got this.
No problem. The absolute worst version of it is presenting to yourself on Zoom, like just to see how you come across. That's the worst. And then watching yourself back.
Yes.
If you can do that, you're fine. It's easy to present to. It doesn't matter if it's 10 or 1,000, really. I mean,
I give that advice to people when they're practicing for interviews or presentations. When I'm coaching them, I'm like, nope, record yourself and watch it. And if you could get through it, you're fine. Because
you're fine. And you'll see what you don't like. And then, you can practice it out and then you can just focus on delivering a good presentation.
Yes. I just did a presentation that it was, putting yourself out there, and I couldn't see the audience. And I almost got in my own head of like, oh my gosh, am I sounding okay? Is this okay? Nobody's engaging. You're like, Angela, they can't engage. Like the comments are turned off until the end. So it's funny.
Yeah. Is anybody even here? Is anybody listening to me? And yeah.
Because in me, and I know it stresses people out if I do like a LinkedIn Live or something live and the comments stream in while you're talking, I prefer that rather than have them turned off, which is interesting because I know other presenters have said, absolutely not. That's too much of a distraction. But severe ADHD here loves that. So like, oh, squirrel, let's look at this. So that's amazing.
Yeah. But how I got into that speaking in Elsevier was, it was not in that first job. So I'm a person who I like being interested in stuff. And when I get bored, I just get itchy feet and I want to move. So after like 4 years in the first job, I moved to a position which was helping journal editors and learning societies to create strategies for their journals based on all of the publication data that they had. So it's analytics, actually based on, the one article refers to another article, lots of different times. So you can say something about how often things are referred to and who they're working with, and you can make some conclusions. And you can look at their competitors and see what they're doing right and wrong, and you make a strategy. So I started to do that. And then I was just in a great position when the company decided that it was going to start a new venture, like a startup venture. Within the big corporate engine, there was this little group. Said, we're going to build an information analytics venture. We have all this publishing data. And they were starting to collect publishing data from other publishers as well. So they had all of this like rich data and wanted to do something with it. So the question was, what shall we do with it? There was a small group of us who built some products there and needed to start going, to universities and funders and influencers in government agencies to say, look, this is what you can do with these kind of insights. This is how it can help you to put your resources more effectively to work. Stop you wasting money. We had to be able to talk about it. And it became bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's really when I started talking at the conferences again. And then with my corporate hat on instead of my research hat on.
I feel you have a whole collection of hats you've worn so far. And I know we're not even to the main hat that got you to where you are today. So we do this corporate speaking. We're wearing different hats. We're incredible here. So how did we move into the people side of this? Because right now you're very analytical.
Yeah.
So how did we make that transition?
Again, I got bored.
I like it.
I'm like, at some point I felt like I wasn't saying anything new about the information analytics stuff. I had my particular specialty in there. I won't go into it. I'll just end up talking about it for 3 hours. I could contribute a lot and I got to work with a lot of great people all around the world. But at some point it was like, I just feel like I'm saying the same things again. I don't have anything new to add. And then that's a real danger sign for me, right? Then I get my itchy feet and off I go looking. Well, yeah, I'd spent a lot of time on the business side of things, always on the business side of change. And there's also another half of change, right? Which is actually the engine that makes it all go, the people. And so I talked to my sponsor in Elsevier and we cooked up a position of chief of staff for our marketing group. So I could still, I thought I would still be talking about stuff, but then with a different group of people, and chief of staff with a much more person-focused, internal-focused role. And it ended up being quite different to what we'd written down in the job description, as these kind of new jobs usually do, right? But it ended up being a job that focused on really designing and shaping the culture of that group so that it was able to function better. Soon after I started, there were like 3 separate teams that got like pushed together. And they'd been separate teams for a very long time. So they had their own ways of working and their own relationships. And own systems and stuff. And they just kind of got pushed together. You can imagine that wasn't the easiest, the easiest push. And just pushing teams together doesn't make them work together. So it didn't go especially well. You know, things were not being shared that you would hope would be shared. People were not learning from each other in the way that we hoped would learn together. And all the efficiencies that you hope will result from a change like that, they just weren't coming through. So my role turned into a support of the SVP of that group, you know, to lead this cultural design and cultural change, which I now know, right? And I would now call it a neurodiversity inspired change. But I think at that time I didn't know that language. I didn't realize that was what we were doing. And I don't think that SVP really knew either, but that was what we were doing. So that was one thing. And at the same time, you know, I became a mum with, I feel like I should give him a shout out. I moved to the Netherlands for a guy, but this guy's no longer in my life. Now I'm with a lovely guy, another Dutch guy. And we have 2 lovely kids. Elise, our daughter, is 9, and Chris, our son, is 7. Chris is also autistic with learning difficulties. So, you know, a few years ago, it became clear that there was something that he was struggling with, and we needed to go on a journey to work out what that was. So eventually, cutting a very long story short, autistic with learning difficulties. And I started to wonder, like, what could this mean in Elsevier? Like, there must be autistic people in Elsevier, or people like me, you know, who's a mum of an autistic kid, or someone, you know, they're caring for someone in their life who's autistic. And maybe it's not only autism, maybe it's, you know, it's broader, it's neurodivergence as a whole, it's ADHD and dyslexia and dyscalculia. So I started to read about it, and I found that there was an employee resource group, an ERG in Elsevier, focused on disability inclusion. So I joined that, and I ended up leading it. You know, we built more of a focus on neurodivergence. And that was another great opportunity to work on culture and building awareness and suggesting behavioral changes to people to change their habits, to be more inclusive of colleagues who seemed to be, maybe they wanted to say it, maybe they didn't, but seemed to be neurodivergent, and also neurodivergent people themselves, to help them to champion themselves and advocate for themselves better. So yeah, there was those 2 things, right? I was in that cultural role of chief of staff, and I was also leading this disability ERG, and I was blown away by the response and the results. It was incredible. So that was kind of what happened. That's a very long story, but that's what brought me here. So you know, I had the idea for this business a few years ago, 3 years ago, 3 and a bit. But I was like, I'm going to have to leave in order to do this, right? Because it's such a big idea. I need to focus on it full time. Of course, it wasn't a good time to leave. But last year, my position was made redundant. So I was like, oh, thank you. You know, you've given me the skill set and the opportunity, the financial opportunity to have the time to focus on building up this idea. So I took the opportunity and I ran, and here I am.
You've had such a good story thus far.
You still awake? I'm sorry, that was such a long...
No, it wasn't. It was perfect. No, we need all the bits and pieces to understand this too. Now, taking the leap into entrepreneurship, doing consulting full time, I mean, you seem to be someone that's just like, oh, I'll figure it out and I'll do it. And obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, but you always seem to figure it out. Because a lot of people, and I get asked this myself being a business owner, when you had this idea and you're like, all right, I need to work on this full time, what was that time frame like, and where did you kind of start with building up your business, thinking this out, and what you wanted to focus on?
Oh my goodness, I don't even know where I started. It was so organic. I mean, the first things that when I first had this idea, I was laying around a swimming pool in Tuscany. Of course, when you relax, right, these ideas come into your head, right?
Beautiful, yes.
And I had the idea, and I was like, shit, this is a really good idea. I had an envelope, so I just scribbled some stuff down on the envelope, like anything that was coming into my head. And then I ran out of space. I went onto the notes in my phone and started typing it in there. And then I kind of looked at it and said, no, this is silly. You have a job and a family, don't be stupid. And I couldn't get it out of my head. So a couple of days later, I told my husband, and I thought, if he laughs at me, this is dead in the water. And he didn't laugh at me. And I thought, shit, okay, now I'm going to have to do it.
I have to do it.
It's like, I will never be able to look at myself in the mirror again if I don't try this. I mean, I just started collecting ideas and writing them down. And I just had a big pile of things, Post-its and, A3s and A4s and I don't know what, envelopes and whatever. I just had this big pile that I just kept collecting. And I didn't try to organize it for quite a while. Once I knew that my position was made redundant, I was like, I got it. And I was like, okay, in here, the seeds of greatness. And actually everything that I'm working on there was in there, but I needed to spend some time sorting it out. So I just did that. And it gave me it was part of what gave me the confidence to to take the plunge, really. But I think, there was also one big thing that I learned with all of those experiences that I had in the corporate world and the research world, was that there's more than one way to get to the same destination. And that was really different than what I described, when I was young. I was still quite logical, but I thought that there was one route that you had to take. That's what I thought, 40 years ago, 30 years ago. That was how I was brought up. But now I know that that's just not true. It is really important to have a destination in place. It doesn't have to be my career in 10 years. It can be what I want to do tomorrow. But, then you just take like a small step and try it. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. It was a small step. You can undo it or redo it or whatever. But somehow or other, with small steps, you're going to get to where you need to go. So that mindset was a really important thing that I've learned in all these years. And it's also a big part of what gave me the confidence to try this.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where we're at today, talk to us on what services you provide, what demographic of people do you help, what does your consulting business look like day to day?
I'll start with my big offering and work back, right? So the big offering is cultural transformation using, let's say, best practices inspired by neurodivergence inclusion. So imagine if you have an organization, a business in which everybody, most people, are fully engaged, right, with your mission. They're fully engaged with the mission and they feel that they can really give their best, the best of themselves to your business. They're not fighting in that they need to work in a particular style. They're not feeling that people are looking down on them because of the way that they think. They're just able to do their best, and they're able to support their colleagues do their best because they're nurturing their colleagues, and it's all a very positive and safe environment. That kind of environment in which everybody can bring their best, regardless of their style, regardless of their cognitive style, their thinking style, that's a neurodiverse, inclusive environment, neurodiverse, inclusive culture. And the benefits are crazy, and it's tens of percentages of differences that you see in a culture like that compared to a culture which is not like that. It's not surprising that there are huge benefits in talent management, right, in retaining talent, because people are engaged and they don't want to leave. They want to get to work. They like it. They're healthy. They're mentally healthy. They're well, so they're not absent and sick. That they're working and they're contributing. So you retain them. It's easier to attract more talent. And if you actually talk about, we are a neuro-inclusive organization, then you can expand the size of the talent pool that you can attract from, because you're going to attract to 30% of people who are neurodivergent as well as neurotypical people. So that's another big benefit. And one of the business areas that really benefits most is innovation and responsiveness to change. You can imagine if you've got all these different ways of thinking, right? Some people, ADHD, are not very resistant to change. They don't mind changing. People who have traits of dyslexia have all these fantastic ideas, and dyscalculia, all these fantastic ideas, very novel ways of putting things together. Autistic people, right? Great in the details, great at looking for patterns, fantastic at making rational decisions, not impacted by emotions. With neurotypical people who can influence people to come along with a plan and make sure that plan is executed, go and present at conferences, whatever. I'm making big generalizations about, autistic people do this. And obviously that's a generalization to make the point. But if you put all of those different kind of skill sets together, obviously you're much better at responding to change and innovating. Yeah. And then innovation revenue you see goes up 20%.
Now, what are some things that, and of course, besides hiring you, because that's an obvious one, but what are some of the accommodations that some of these organizations can make for neurodivergent people? Or I'm sure you hear it all of, oh, we don't need to do that. Everyone works well. We're fine. We don't need what you do.
There are some different stages. Let me share an example from each different stage. So I think the first stage is really making everybody, and it has to be everybody in your organization to make a cultural change happen and stick. So make everybody aware and understand that they can all do things, take simple steps to be more accommodating of others, whether those others are neurodivergent or not. So it might be something simple like not insisting that people are going to share all their ideas with you now, right? Some people like to think and look at data and put it in writing in a more considered way. And does it really matter if you give people an extra day so that they can feed back in writing? That's an easy behavioural change that everybody can take if they're just aware of it and given the permission and maybe the expectation that they have to do it. And there are lots of behavioural changes like that people can make. Yeah, but awareness and individual changes in habits, that's the first step. then what's really important is that the organization is going to make sure that it recognizes those behaviors and that it rewards those behaviors in performance evaluations and promoting people. Not that it says that it wants one thing and then rewards a different thing. So like you can't say, for example, that you want people to nurture each other in a team environment so that the collective genius of the team emerges. You can't say that and then reward somebody for kind of going off on their own and doing something without involving other people, right? That's just not going to stick. Nobody's going to believe that you really want the culture if you're not rewarding them. So you need to then make sure that your business processes are really reinforcing the culture that people have started to learn and to put in place. And the last step is making sure that your policies, the real written down hard policies, are reflecting all of those changes. So an example there will be, for example, that your harassment and bullying policy calls out neurodivergence or cognitive differences as one of the ways in which people may be discriminated against, and sets clear expectations about what is not allowed and how people have to behave. It's obvious there's more in each stage, but just to give an example, that's what an organization could do. When I said I'd talk about all of my offerings, that's like the big offering. And it is a big commitment for an organization that kind of change like that. It's a multi-year process. The first step is a workshop, honestly. It could be to learn about, what is neurodivergence? Why is neurodivergence? And what we can learn from neurodivergence relevant to our culture. It could be a workshop, let's say, for managers. Now I have a lot of people telling me that they have a lot of people with ADHD in their teams and they don't know what to do. Could be a workshop to help managers who feel a bit out of their depth and, a bit nervous maybe about how they should best support their team members. That's probably the first step, is that you would have a workshop or a short course to understand the relevance and build the confidence that there's really something here for you and that it's worth taking a look at investing in the longer term. And before we get into talking about any money at all, anybody who's interested can sign up for my newsletter, which I launched recently. It's called Cogitate Activate, and you can sign up for it on my website. It's free. You get a newsletter from me every 2 weeks, and that's where I'm sharing real tips that people can try out, easy changes in habit that they can make, and they can observe the impact and share it back with the rest of the community. So that'd be great if anybody wants to just have a look, see what's in here for them there, to see them in the community.
That's incredible. So obviously you have more service offerings too, but what are you primarily focused on this year or going into next year? Not to be ahead of ourselves, but what's your kind of main priority right now and where you're helping organizations make changes?
Our main priority right now is really building up the knowledge of, I want to say leadership, it's actually everybody in organizations. It's really building up the knowledge and awareness of people about what working in this kind of way, what paying attention to this kind of work can bring. I think often organizations tend to focus on problems separately, whereas they can be really unified by taking this kind of approach, right? If you look at your people and give them a very nurturing, empowering culture to work in, probably that will solve all, if not most of your problems in one, instead of having to have all these separate projects for different things. And that's really something that I'm focusing on now. And as I say, developing these smaller workshops to get people confident that here is something for us. We understand the relevance for us, and we're interested in looking at the longer term culture change.
Where do you see, or where do you hope, because we can't predict the future, where do you hope to see the future goes for neurodivergent professionals or the next generation, or when your son's old enough to enter the workforce? Where do you hope to see change, or when can we see we are truly inclusive instead of just stamping the DEI stamp that a lot of companies do without actually taking the efforts?
Yeah. I mean, things have changed a lot, right, in the last 50 years. So I think we're on the right path. Most people are aware that there is something called neurodivergence or ADHD or autism. Maybe they have their opinions about it. Maybe they don't really know what it means, but at least they've heard the word, right? So that's big progress from where we were a few years ago. We must continue the process. I think that's really key. And what I would like is that it's not such a big topic anymore, right? That people are aware of it. People feel more confident knowing what they can do to help people who are neurodivergent, and also that neurodivergent people feel more confident knowing what they can do to work with people who are neurodivergent in another way or neurotypical, because it's a two-way, has to be a two-way exchange. So that it's just much more normalized. People feel confident in working in this way and in enabling all of this fantastic diversity that we can all contribute to our teams.
Wow. Now, Lisa, you have been incredible with the incredible career you've had and the transitions and everything you've done. So as we wrap this up, what advice do you have for listeners?
I only gave one big piece of advice, right? There's more than one way.
Yes.
More than one way to get to the same end. The other piece of advice I thought of when I was preparing was it's important to trust. Just have trust. Right? Trust in yourself that you know what you're doing and you're going to be good enough when you get there. That was one part of it. Trust in other people who want to help you. I mean, like you have me on your podcast, which is fantastic. Right, to an audience I wouldn't otherwise reach. This is help. This is fantastic. And people generally want to help and offer suggestions and help you brainstorm or whatever if they buy into what you're doing. So you can also have trust in people to help you. The last one is trust in the universe, right? The universe does present opportunities if you are open to looking for them. It's something that I've learned in the later part of my life. I didn't really see that in the beginning. But the universe does offer things to you if you're open to seeing them. Maybe it's not the thing that you thought it would be there, but usually it's a way forwards. As I say, we trust ourselves that we have the experience and knowledge to benefit from those opportunities if we take them. So trust. It'll be okay in the end.
It will. It'll work out. Exactly. Lisa, you have been absolutely incredible. I'm so happy we got connected and you agreed to this podcast.
Thank you.
And for those of you listening, if you want to work with Lisa or sign up for a newsletter, head to the show notes and tune in again next week for another episode of That's Business.
If you're looking for a career change and you're not sure where to start, the Resume Rescue can help. Sure, there's no such thing as the perfect fit for everyone, but here at the Resume Rescue, we're on a mission to find the perfect solution for you. Whether it's changing careers, updating a resume, learning LinkedIn, or practicing interviewing, we have you covered. Find us online at theresumerescue.com and find all of our contact info in our show notes.